Hello everyone, my name is Robert and welcome back to Unraveling Politics. This is a show where I discuss the political news of the day and I provide my analysis in a way that people can understand. So, the big news of the week, obviously, was Kamala Harris picking Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be the next vice president. Now, if you listen to my last episode, I predicted that it would be Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. I had my reasons for that if you go back and listen to it. But there were also reasons that Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz. So in this episode, we're going to discuss why she picked Tim Walz, why it wasn't Josh Shapiro, how the Republican response is, and what the state of the race is now. So, in the final hours before we knew, ABC News reported that multiple signs had been printed out for all the potential vice presidents. The Harris campaign was prepared for it to be Shapiro or for it to be Tim Walz. So it was truly a last-minute decision. On Tuesday morning, we learned that it would be Tim Walz, and then there was a rally in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia specifically, with the governor and the two governors and the vice president. So, the big thing for me, why didn't she pick Josh Shapiro? Well, there's two reasons if you ask me. First is, according to my people who have met the governor, people who I know personally, the Governor Shapiro, they have said that Governor Shapiro is a very good orator. I'm going to play a clip of Governor Shapiro. You're going to hear him. He's a great orator, but he's not very great at interpersonal relations. He's not very good at chit-chat. He would struggle to connect with voters in a one-on-one setting. At least that's what I've been told. He's not a very small talk kind of guy. And I'm not hating him on that. Neither am I. I don't like small talk either. I like to get right to it. But that is one of the reasons. That's not a huge deal. The other one is probably going to be that he's too good. Now, you might think, what does that mean? He would outshine her on the ticket. He clearly wants to be president. He desperately wants to be president. But I don't know if he's that desperate to be vice president first and then try to run for president again run for president after being vice president. So, if you ask me, he's holding off. He might be betting that Kamala's going to lose and then run in 28, or maybe that Kamala will win and then run in a decade or two. Who knows? Either way, the Trump campaign is relieved it's not Shapiro. And I did say before it happened, before Shapiro was not picked, I said that if I was in the Trump campaign, if they had picked Tim Walz, I would be pissing my pants laughing if I was in the Trump campaign. And this is my reasoning why, at least at the time, was that Josh Shapiro would almost certainly lock up the state of Pennsylvania. It would be basically impossible for Trump to win Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro on the ticket. And if Trump doesn't win Pennsylvania, then Trump probably wouldn't win the presidency. It would be very, very, very difficult because the three Midwestern states tend to vote as a block. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, they tend to vote together. They've done it for the last many presidential elections, well before even I was born. So I would be very skeptical of any sort of plan where they're broken up into different areas. If different parties, like where one party wins one state and then another party wins two others, it could happen, but it would be pretty unlikely if you ask me, at least compared to previous election results. The most conservative of the three states is almost certainly to be Wisconsin. So if any state is going to go to Trump and the other two go to Harris, it'll be Wisconsin. Let me just throw that out there. Now, why did she pick Tim Walz over Josh Shapiro? Well, there's two reasons if you ask me. First of all, Tim Walz, it would be very, very difficult to portray him as a radical because he served in the National Guard, he went to Iraq, and he also was a school teacher. And he's just an average Midwestern guy, or at least that's what he's being portrayed as. It would be very, very difficult to portray him as a radical. They will try anyway, don't get me wrong, and they have, but it would be much, much harder to do so. Then another reason, and I'm not saying Shapiro is a radical, but that's one kind of plus in in Walz's camp. And then this is another thing, is Walz has had over 5 years as governor to have a legislative accomplishment table and a whole list. Here's just some of the stuff. Universal free meals, legal marijuana, carbon-free electricity by 2040, tax rebates for the working class up to $1,300, 12 weeks of paid family leave, 12 weeks of paid sick leave, a ban on conversion therapy, red flag laws for guns, universal background checks for guns, automatic voter registration, free public college, a ban on forever chemicals, also known as PFAS, and $2.2 billion increase in K-12 public funding, and sectorial bargaining for nursing home workers. Shapiro has had an impressive legislative accomplishments so far, but not nearly as impressive as Tim Walz, because Shapiro's only been governor for not even 2 years yet. And a lot of this stuff, if you're at all in tune with politics, if you notice, some of this stuff has been on the Democratic Party agenda for literally decades. Like paid sick leave and paid family leave has been on the Democratic Party probably since FDR was president, and that was almost a century ago. A ban on conversion therapy, that's been on the Democratic Party platform for a decade or more, as well as red flag laws for guns and universal background checks. If you're a Republican, though, even if Tim Walz becomes vice president and Kamala Harris is president, it's unlikely any of this stuff will get done, because there will likely be a Republican Senate, maybe a Republican House, we'll see, but there'll almost certainly be a Republican Senate, and some of these issues are also state issues. So if you're a Republican and you really, really don't want, for example, free public college, it is pretty unlikely that is going to happen, even if they become president. They would need a substantial majority in the Senate to make that happen. Let me play a clip of Governor Josh Shapiro, and the reason I want to play this is because it shows the Democratic Party is united. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is in deep disarray. And I'll explain more after I play the clip.
You know, the other side, Trump and his sycophants, let me tell you something. They love to talk a good game about freedom, right? They love to cloak themselves in the blanket of freedom all the time. They love to talk a good game. But hear me on this. It's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. That's not freedom. It's not. It's not. It's not freedom to say you can go to work, but you can't join a union. That's not freedom. It's not freedom to tell women what they're allowed to do with their bodies. That's not freedom. It's not. It's not. It is not. No, it's not. It is not. And it won't be that way when Kamala Harris is our president. And it sure as hell isn't freedom to say you can go vote, but he's going to pick the winner. That is not freedom. That's not what patriots have fought for over the years. It is not. You know what we are for? You know what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are for? They are for real freedom. They are. The kind of real freedom that comes when we look that young girl in North Philly in the eye and we invest in her public school because we believe in her. We believe in real freedom, the kind of freedom that comes when we invest in our police and we invest in our communities because we believe that young girl should walk to and from school safely and back to her mama at the end of the night. We believe in real freedom where the young girl can grow up and be whatever she wants. She can be a welder. She can go to college. She can be who she is. That is real freedom, and that is what we are fighting for. We believe in the kind of real freedom where she grows up in a community where she can breathe clean air and drink clean water and know that she will leave an environment to the next generation that is great for her kids and her grandkids. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz believe in a real freedom where you can marry who you love and be who you are. Now, freedom is on the ballot. And our fundamental freedoms are at risk. And I know when it's at risk, it's easy to feel uneasy. And it's easy to get down. But let me tell you something, Philly. Let me tell you something, Pennsylvania. Let me tell you something, America. I am more optimistic than ever before.
If that doesn't sound like a president in waiting, then I don't know who does. Now, he's not, as I said, he's not going to be president immediately or even in the near future, but I think he will be at some point. So that sounds like a party that's united. There were thousands of people in that stadium, from what I understand. He's a great orator, and he would have been a great value to the ticket, in my personal opinion. Although, as I said, he might have outshined Harris. So, what is the conservative response in her picking Tim Walz? Well, first, let me throw this out there. This wasn't necessarily about Tim Walz, but J.D. Vance said, and I quote, "My attitude is, it doesn't really matter as much as this is a hit to my ego. People are primarily voting for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. That's the way things go." Of course, and that's the end of the quote. Of course, that is true. Most people don't think about vice president when they vote. They should, but they don't. Exhibit A would be 2008, and Sarah Palin would not have wanted her to be president. Had John McCain croaked, which was totally possible because he was an older guy. And the problem is, even though that is true, you usually won't admit that unless you're doing damage control. Like, no previous vice president, as far as I know, has ever admitted that, or vice presidential candidate. He is doing damage control because I'm sure he knows at this point that things are not going well. He probably doesn't yet realize that he is one of the worst picks that Trump could have picked, if not the worst. He needs to really they need to get on the same page here, because Walz is adding to the ticket, as I explained why Vance is taking away from the ticket, as I explained in previous episodes. So what's the conservative response? Well, let me first play a little small clip from Fox News, and you can see what they said. As you can hear from this, there's going to be no point in picking a candidate. They could literally pick Fidel Castro. Kamala Harris could have picked Fidel Castro, or could pick the most tame Democrat on the planet. That they would still be called radical. And here's proof.
This morning, it just may be the most far-left agenda in our country's history on a presidential ticket.
Because the Democratic ticket is now set. Governor Tim Walz's record in Minnesota includes everything from tax-funded health care for illegals to so-called gender-affirming care for minors, just to name a few, as we've been doing this morning.
Well, I believe those are legitimate concerns. There's clearly many Democrats that would have been way, way worse than that. So, here's what Trump had to say in response. If you ask me, it's pretty crazy and deranged, and hopefully you enjoy it and have a laugh.
It's really a gift for you, because this election is all about the issues, and all of y'all have records. You've been the president. We know where the economy stood. We know what your record is. We know what Kamala Harris's record is, and we know what his record is, and they are extremely progressive. Talk about how you're going to handle this on the campaign trail. Will you just really hone in on how they voted in the past?
Well, I am. I'm going to be doing that, what he wants. If you look at his record with no walls, no security, let everybody in, he's worse than they are. Nobody knew how radical left she was, but he's a smarter version of her, if you want to know the truth. He's probably about the same as Bernie Sanders. He's probably more so than Bernie Sanders. She is more so than Bernie Sanders. That's got to be your guide, Bernie Sanders, and that's not a great guide. But there's never been a ticket like this. This is a ticket that would want this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner. We want no security. We want no anything. He's very heavy into transgender. Anything transgender he thinks is great. And he's not where the country is on anything.
Mr. President,
this is a shocking, let me tell you, this is a shocking pick. And I think it's very insulting to Jewish people, and I think it's very insulting to people that want security. I think it's very insulting to anything having to do with making America great again.
Mr. President, is it true that your team thought for sure that it was going to be Josh Shapiro? Because there was one reporter who was at a J.D. Vance event yesterday, and there were some flyers printed up talking about how J.D. Vance, rather about how Mr. Shapiro was a fraud and corrupt and a lying con man and stuff like that. So it sounds like you were ready to take on him.
That sounds like what you were saying.
Well, look, I'm no big fan of Josh Shapiro. I know the state very well. I think we're leading pretty good in that state, but I would have said it would have been a better choice. I would have said others would have better choice. And interesting, just about all of them, except this one, is better than her. She is not nearly as good as the people she was looking at. I know them all in one form or another. And in fact, there was a poll done, and there were some studies done. She's the worst of the group, and she's the one that's leading it. Look at this decision. This is a really bad decision for the country. You know, ultimately, I want the country to have good decisions, because ultimately what we want is for the country to do well. The country can't do well with these two people. They're
right.
Very similar, and you know, you would have thought she would have reached out and got somebody that's got some different, because her record on security is horrible. She was a border czar, which she doesn't admit it now. You know, the only thing they have going is the media will play off all of the bad things that happened during her term. She was so bad that 5 weeks ago they wanted to remove her because she was unthinkable to be president. They were going to go with anyone. And then they were afraid that they would offend people if they did that. And all of a sudden, inch by inch, and then she ends up taking over. Now the same press that thought she was the worst vice president in history, which is true, going along with the worst president in history. And he went down after the debate, and there was nothing much they could do. They tried to come back. Then they brought her in, and everybody said, it'll never be her. She's so bad. She's incompetent. And after they studied it a little bit, they realized it's not going to be so easy to do. So they say, well, look, the press is going to do whatever we want because the press is a rigged deal. The press is the media, outside of you people, of course, but the media is so, they're trying to build her up to the next Margaret Thatcher liberal version, and I don't believe it's going to happen. I hear she's hasn't taken one interview. She would never do an interview like this. That I can guarantee with any network. She doesn't do interviews because she can't answer questions. I don't know how she debates. I heard she's sort of a nasty person, but not a good debater. But we'll see, because we'll be debating her, I guess, in the pretty near future. It's going to be announced fairly soon, but we'll be debating her. I'd like to see it on Fox, by the way.
It will not be on Fox, by the way. Instead, it will be on ABC News on September the 10th. And my favorite part of that clip was when he said, Tim Walz wants to turn this country communist immediately, if not sooner. It's like you can't get any sooner than immediately. And also, this really did sound like AI. Like, it sounded like an AI-generated response. The only thing that they were missing was, like, Crooked Hillary and Sleepy Joe, and they would have had or Crazy Kamala, and they would have had the whole thing. Anyway, that I thought you would enjoy that. So, Trump has clearly been using more and more extreme methods to get attention, such as questioning whether Harris is Indian or black. Meanwhile, Harris is moderated on her policies. I've talked about that before. The Democrats are united. Republicans seem more divided now than they were even just a month ago. Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, which has angered the right of his base, and the race stuff, which I just mentioned, has angered the moderates. So where does that plate the race from here? Well, my guess would be that Harris has dominated the news cycle, as we know that, and she will continue to dominate the news cycle until at least the end of August, if not until Labor Day, because of the Democratic convention. There's going to be a big poll bounce. She's definitely in the lead already. She's going to have an even bigger lead. However, I think that's going to settle in the future. So if you're a Republican, the good news is I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as it is right now. Trump's favorability is falling after the RNC and the assassination attempt, but the same thing will likely happen with Harris's. And as more things come out about Harris, I think people are not going to like her quite as much as they do right now. The good news for Democrats is you have lots of momentum. I would keep that up if you can. So let me just say real quick, in 2016, the polling obviously favored Hillary Clinton. At this point in 2016, Hillary led by 7 points, and she ended up winning the popular vote by 2.5, so it was 4.5 points off. So this is definitely not a done deal. Anyone who says this is in the bag, I always say, look at 2016, everyone thought that Hillary was going to win. In 2018, the polling was pretty even. It was accurate across the board. In 2020, the polling favored Biden. Biden still won, but it favored him. In 2022, it favored Republicans. Republicans won the House, but overall they underperformed across the country. On a state level, in Ohio and Wisconsin, those polls tend to favor Democrats, while in Nevada, the polls tend to favor Republicans. And in the other swing states, there tends to be less predictable error. That is all I really have to say for now. The next 2 weeks, I will not have a regular episode. I will have a special episode on populism and another one about Project 2025 and whether I think it'll be implemented. So the next regular episode will come out on September 2nd, but of course, as I said, I'll have content for you guys to watch or listen to. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.